Today, we're diving into something pretty radical, a blueprint for a totally new world order. And his whole argument is that the global system we think we know, well, it's not at all what it seems. So let's just get right into it. We hear this phrase thrown around constantly, the rules-based international order. But what if it's not really about rules at all? What if the whole system isn't a level playing field? What if the rules themselves are actually designed to keep the same players winning time and time again? That's the really provocative question we're tackling today. So you've got the official story, right? This idea of a global order built on cooperation, where everyone benefits. But then there's this other view, the hidden reality. And in this version, the system isn't about equality at all. It's actually a machine built to manage inequality, to make sure the privileges of a few are locked in place. Two very different pictures. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to deconstruct the current order. Then we'll look at the mental trap that keeps it going. After that, we'll explore a new strategy for change. And finally, a blueprint for a whole new system. Okay, let's get into the deconstruction. So if the global system isn't just a bunch of neutral rules, what is it? Well, the argument here is that it's actually a very carefully designed structure, an architecture really, that's held up by three fundamental and often totally hidden privileges. So yeah, forget the idea of a garden where everyone can grow. Think of it more like a machine. And to really understand how this machine works, you've got to look at the three core privileges that are basically its power source. First up, there's what's called the nuclear privilege. Now, this isn't just about who has nuclear weapons. It's way deeper than that. It's a system that says it's okay, it's legitimate, for a small club of countries to have them. This gives them what you could call existential immunity. They're basically safe from invasion. But if anyone else tries to get them, well, then it's framed as a massive threat to the world. It creates this permanent two-tier system of who gets to feel secure. And this is all about who controls the story, right? For the established powers, their nukes are for stability. But for anyone else, this same exact weapon is called proliferation or terror. It's a total double standard. And it's not just an idea. It's baked right into institutions like the UN Security Council and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And that brings us right to the second pillar, the institutional privilege. Think about the UN Security Council and the veto power held by the P5, the 5 prominent members. That veto basically gives them a monopoly to decide when and where using military force is legitimate. And the key takeaway from this analysis is that this isn't some bug or flaw in the system. It's a feature. It was designed this way from the very beginning. Yeah, there's a great quote from the political scientist Enos L. Claude Jr. that just nails it. He said the UN was never created to force the big powers to do anything. It was designed to help them cooperate in, and I quote, policing smaller states. So it's a tool for management, not for equal governance. And that brings us to the third and final pillar, which is really the economic engine of this whole order. It's called the exorbitant privilege of the US dollar. Just think about the incredible power you have when your own currency is the one the rest of the world uses for trade and savings. It means you can finance your own economy and project power in a way that is literally impossible for any other country. So how does this actually work? Well, it's kind of wild. The US can essentially run deficits without tears, as it's been called. They can borrow in their own currency, so they don't face the same risks everyone else does. It's like they're trading paper for real stuff. Cars, electronics, you name it. And here's the crazy part. When a global crisis hits, what do? They rush to buy dollars as a safe haven, which only makes the dollar and the system even stronger. It's a pretty sweet deal if you're the one at the center. Okay, so we have these three huge unequal privileges: nuclear, institutional, and financial. It begs a massive question, doesn't it? Why on earth do so many other countries just go along with it? Well, the answer isn't just about military or economic might. It's about something much more subtle, a powerful mental trap. This idea is called the coloniality of power. You can think of it as an invisible cage of ideas, sort of a hangover from the colonial era. It creates this thing called epistemic insecurity. That's a fancy term for a really simple but powerful feeling. The belief that your own country's ideas, your strategies, your way of doing things, they aren't really valid until they get the thumbs up from the dominant Western powers. And this feeling traps countries in a really vicious cycle. It goes like this. First, you want to be seen as a responsible stakeholder. You want a seat at the table. So what do? You practice self-restraint. You're super careful not to do anything that might get you labeled anti-Western or disruptive. But by playing it safe and never challenging the basic rules, you accidentally end up reinforcing the very hierarchy that's holding you down. You give up real autonomy for a pat on the head. So, if that's the trap, how do you get out? How do you break free? Well, according to this analysis, the old ways of doing things just aren't going to cut it. We need a totally new strategy, and it's called assertive convergence. See, the old way was something like non-alignment, trying to stay neutral. But the argument here is that in a system that's already tilted, being neutral just helps the powerful stay powerful. This new path, assertive convergence, isn't about picking a new ideological team, no. It's about something much more practical. Working with other rising powers to build the real-world stuff, the financial and strategic tools that can actually shift the balance of power for good. So what does that actually look like? What's the plan? Let's get to the blueprint. The central idea is simple but powerful. You don't ask for permission to change the system. You just start building a new one, starting with the very foundation, the financial system. Now, this isn't a quick fix. It's a roadmap that could span decades, but it starts with very concrete steps. In the short term, it's all about creating options. In the medium term, you start building new institutions, and then in the long term, you go for the really big prize, changing the entire logic of what value even means in the global economy. Okay, so short-term goals. The first steps are all about giving yourself choices. Start using other currencies in trade and finance, like China's renminbi. Set up a new commodities exchange that's outside of US control, so you're not stuck with prices set in New York or London. The point isn't to kill the dollar tomorrow. The goal is to create what's called sovereignty by options. Because at the end of the day, when you have real options, you have real leverage. Then, once you move into the medium term, the strategy gets clever. After you've shown that these alternative systems actually work, you pivot the whole conversation. You stop using confrontational language like de-dollarization. Instead, you start proposing things like a multilateral clearing system. See how that sounds? It's about balance, fairness, cooperation. It's a brilliant shift from just being against something to being for something new. And this all builds toward the massive, long-term vision, a climate standard. Look, for the last 50 years, the dollar has been tied to oil, backed by military power. This idea flips that script entirely. It proposes a new system where value is backed by something real and positive, a country's contribution to climate stability. Just take a second and imagine that. A world where restoring a mangrove forest is treated as a core financial asset, just like a barrel of oil is today. It's a game changer. Now look, this isn't just some pipe dream. There's a really pragmatic plan for how different powers could work together. China brings the massive industrial capacity needed for a green transition. Europe, with its experience in regulation, could be the one to verify the standards. The expanded BRICS countries, they bring the market, the demand, the scale. And then countries like Brazil, rich in natural resources, they become the anchor, linking all that natural wealth to the new system's rules. So, when you boil it all down, the single most crucial point of this whole thing is this. A real seat at the global table isn't something you're given. It's not something you get by asking nicely or waiting for reforms. It's something you take. You win it by building the hard, material power, both financial and strategic, that makes it absolutely impossible for anyone to ignore you. And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. Is the future won by fighting for a better seat at the old table? Or does it belong to those with the vision and the courage to just go out and build a completely new one?